Corporal Wills SETI had been assigned the clipboard because he was the lowest ranked man in the building, and everyone in the room knew it. He stood at the edge of the mat with a pen he hadn't used yet and a roster he'd already memorized, watching Fort Braden's combatives evaluation hall fill up with Rangers who moved the way Rangers move. Wide through the shoulders, easy in the hips, kind of men who filled a doorframe just by standing near it. The overhead lights ran the length of the ceiling in 2 white rows, and the mat beneath them was thick blue foam that had absorbed a decade of hard landings without complaint. SETI had been on it himself, twice, and both times he'd left with something bruised. Master Sergeant Pruitt ran intake from a folding table near the door. He was a thick man with a clipboard of his own, and the unhurried authority of someone who had decided everything important before anyone else arrived. When the civilian candidate came through the door, a young woman in plain gray training clothes, a duffel over one shoulder, dark hair pulled back, nothing on her that announced anything. Pruitt looked at her the way a man looks at the wrong address. He checked his sheet. He looked at her again. "Evaluations for the Ranger Combatives program," he said. "I know," she said. He pointed to the far bench along the wall. "Observers sit there." She looked at the bench. She looked at him. Then she walked to the bench and sat down, set her duffel between her feet, folded her hands in her lap. She did not argue. She did not explain. SETI watched her from across the mat and thought, without meaning to, that she looked like someone who had been told to wait before, and had learned that waiting was just another form of preparation. Colonel Marsh came in at 0800, and the room adjusted to him the way rooms do. Not snapping to, just tightening. The low talk going quiet, the Rangers orienting toward him without being directed to. He was a compact man, deliberate, and he ran the evaluation the way he ran everything. Methodically, without waste. He called the first pair to the mat, and SETI marked the clipboard and watched. The Rangers were good. They were more than good. They moved through the combatives rotations with the kind of fluency that only gets built on a long ledger of repetitions. Entries and escapes and transitions, weight shifts that looked small and weren't, grips that were gone before the other man finished reacting to them. Marsh watched from the edge with his arms crossed and said little. When he spoke, it was a correction delivered once, flat, and the Ranger receiving it nodded and did not need to hear it twice. The woman on the bench watched it all. She did not look bored. She did not look intimidated. She watched the mat the way a person watches something they have thought about for a long time. 40 minutes in, a Ranger volunteer named Decker caught his knee wrong coming off a throw and went down hard. Not a break, SETI could tell by the way Marsh looked at it. The absence of alarm, but enough. The medic came over. Decker sat up and waved him off with the expression of a man who was furious at his own body, and Marsh turned and surveyed the room with the look of a man recalculating. His eyes moved to the bench. SETI saw the calculation happen, saw it resolve into something between irritation and amusement. "Contritiant," Marsh said. "Not unkind, but not careful either, since you came all the way out here." A few of the Rangers glanced at each other. Not mean, just the small private communication of men who have already decided how something is going to go. The woman stood. She unzipped her duffel, took out a pair of training gloves, and pulled them on. She walked to the edge of the mat and stopped there, and looked at Marsh. "Who do you want?" she said. Marsh almost smiled. He nodded toward a Ranger named Cortez, who was 230 if he was an ounce, and had been the sharpest mover on the mat all morning. She stepped onto the blue foam. She did not look around. She faced Cortez and took her stance, weight low, hands easy, nothing telegraphed, and SETI tightened his grip on the clipboard without knowing why. Cortez came in behind a feint, reading well, changing the angle the way a trained man does. She did not chase the feint. She waited one count past the moment SETI would have reacted, caught Cortez's lead wrist in a grip that didn't look like much, stepped through his center, him, on his back with a throw that made a sound like a door closing. She did not chase him to the ground. She stepped back and reset. The room had gone quieter. Cortez got up. He nodded once. A Ranger's acknowledgement, clean and genuine. Marsh watched and said nothing. He nodded at the next man. The next Ranger was faster. He pressured immediately, no feint, just forward motion and weight. She read the pressure before it arrived, slipped inside it. and took his back with a transition so compact that SETI, watching at 6 feet, couldn't isolate the moment it happened. The submission came in 11 seconds. A rear collar control that had the Ranger tapping, before he'd fully registered being there. She released clean, stood, stepped back. The room was very quiet now. Marsh sent a third man. She dropped him in 15 seconds with an inside trip into a ground control that she held until he tapped, then released and stood without ceremony. And a fourth, the biggest man in the rotation, a Ranger named Galvez, who moved with the careful deliberateness of someone who knew exactly how strong he was. He lasted 20 seconds. She worked him to the mat through a series of entries that looked, to SETI, like water finding its level, not forced, not rushed. Each step the inevitable result of the one before it. When Galvez tapped, she stood and walked back to the edge of the mat and stopped. 4 Rangers. Not one of them outclassed. They were good men and she had been better. Marsh had his tablet out. SETI hadn't seen him reach for it. The colonel was looking at the screen, with the expression of a man reading a document he hadn't expected to find in his own hands. His thumb moved once, twice. The room waited. "Condidiant," Marsh said. His voice had changed, not softer, steadier. The way a voice changes when a man is being precise, because precision is what the moment requires. "What's your call sign?" She looked at him from the mat's edge. "Lodestar," she said. One of the Rangers near SETI made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Marsh was still reading. The tablet had her file on it. SETI couldn't see the screen, but he could read the room, and the room was reading like a man who had been standing in front of a painting for 10 minutes before he understood what it was. Marsh set the tablet down on the scorer's table. He looked at her for a moment, then he straightened, and in one motion, brought his right hand up to a salute that was rendered with the full formality of a man who knew exactly what he was doing and had decided to do it, in front of everyone. "Level IV certification," he said, not to her, to the room. "Youngest in the program's history. She holds the submission record for the Army Combatives Instructor Evaluation. She has been certified to train and evaluate Ranger-level combatives since she was 26. He lowered his hand. She wasn't here as an observer. She was assigned as the lead evaluator. Error, not hers. Pruitt, by his folding table near the door, was very still. He was looking at the woman with the particular expression of a man who has said something he cannot unsay and has just fully understood that fact. 4 Rangers she'd submitted. Cortez, the second man, the third, Galvez, stood without being ordered. No signal passed between them. They simply stood. SETI stood too, though he couldn't have explained the exact moment he decided to. He had been holding the clipboard for 2 hours and doing nothing that mattered. Preet. And now he was standing at the edge of a mat in a room that had gone completely still, watching a woman accept a colonel's salute with the same composure she'd brought to everything else. No smile, no triumph, no performance. Just the level eyes and the steady hands of someone who had always known what the work required and had done it regardless of who was watching. She nodded once to Marsh. She walked back to the bench and unzipped her duffel and took out her notes. An actual notebook, paper, pen, and opened it to the evaluation rubric she had clearly already prepared. "Resume the rotation," she said. "We have 6 more candidates, and I want the assessments clean." Marsh said, "Yes, ma'am." SETI looked down at his clipboard. He turned to a fresh page. He got to work. He was 21 years old, and he had seen a great many things that day that he had expected to see. But he would carry that salute, the way it landed, the way she received it, for the rest of his life. Because it was the first time he understood, in his bones rather than his mind, what it actually meant to earn something.